sometimes I do make myself think about it this way, that I'm like, well, if I enjoy helping them out with it so much, I can trick them into asking for help more often by me asking for help.
Well, literally. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Pickles and Vodka, the mental health podcast where we forget to do the intros during our interviews and Christina has to record them after the fact. I am soon going to launch into our interview of the week with my friend Effie. It was a lot of fun and some really hot takes were had. I don't know if I should presume that, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind you that we still have a pickle poll live. You can go to our Instagram and answer it in the comments, or you can go to speakpipe.com/pickles-and-vodka to send us a voice message that we will play on the podcast. Again, the question is, how do you overthink your mental health? Where is the line between healthy introspection and toxic rumination? And that'll make more sense to you if you listened to last week's episode, number 169. I think Lauren and I are going to start giving y'all 2 weeks instead of 1 week to answer the pickle polls. And that's partly to allow you more time to gather your thoughts and partly to make things a little easier for us. Anyway, here's the interview. Lauren and I hope you enjoy. So, welcome to Pickles and Vodka. Today we have a guest with us, my friend Effie. Say hello.
Hi. Hello.
Effie, what is your deal? How old are you? Where do you live? What is your... I was going to say what's your deal, but I already said that.
I'm like, oh wow, getting right into it. Not even we're Pickles and Vodka, not even these are your hosts.
Well, I figure we could do the intro separately.
Oh, okay.
Well, because I don't know when this is coming out.
Fair enough.
I told Effie beforehand I'm terrible at this. We haven't done, it's been a while since we did a guest. I guess I should have introduced the two of y'all before we got started, huh?
Did you try an interview with us before?
I had scheduled one before, but then I think that was when the microphone thing was happening.
Oh, yeah.
I knew that. I guess I remembered we interviewed one of your friends when I was at the old place, and it didn't work.
I don't remember who that was. Oh, my God.
Well, they had a name that, at least in my brain, is very similar to Effie. That's why I thought it might be you. It could be nothing similar to Effie. That is, like I said, it's just how my brain works.
Anyway, Effie, Lauren, Effie.
Hello.
Hello.
How about this? Let's say how we're all feeling today. I'll go first. I was at my parents' house, and so I'm feeling kind of like... I've been really in my head today. It's one of those days where I just can't get off my phone, and it's making me feel worse and worse, and I just cannot put it down. And then when I do put it down and go out into the world, like I was telling Effie, I was just going on a bike ride past the apartment where they live.
Yeah.
And I just felt like an alien. Like the sun was super bright and I felt like everyone was looking at me and I was just like, this sucks.
I know that feeling, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that's where I'm at today, I guess. I'm feeling a little bit anxious, I guess. But that's just all the time. Lauren, how about you?
So I'm feeling kind of just low and depressed. This is something I've talked about with some friends, but this is going to surprise Christina. I haven't brought it up on the podcast.
Oh, God.
I'm afraid that I have to get rid of Meatball. I mean, it's been a thought in my head since I've moved here, and I feel like in the last couple weeks, at this point, it's not like I moved a week ago. I moved a month and a half ago. In the last couple of weeks, I feel like he's gotten even worse and is being more antagonizing to my old dog and more trying to just destroy everything he possibly can. So it really got me thinking, in addition to I get no sleep because he's being insane and he's being insane. So I worry about things like not getting any of my security deposit back. But also because of this and noticing, like I said, I feel like it's getting worse. It made me start to think like, well, if he wasn't like this before, he's probably telling me he's not happy. And I'm doing everything I can, and it doesn't seem to be helping. And that makes me feel even more like, I just feel like if he's also just unhappy.
Well, and cats are so, I mean, we are all cat owners. And cats do not like change either. And y'all just went through a really big change.
Yeah.
But also, I know he's been acting like this for a while.
Yeah, he's never been great with Pico, and I feel like it got a lot worse in this place because it's smaller. In particular, my last place had an upstairs and downstairs, so I think it was really good for them to be able to be separate easier.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been really hard. And so just kind of coming to that conclusion just made me feel really bummed. Like, oh, I think I really have to do it. Meatball.
Oh, and it's nothing. Nothing that's wrong with him.
No,
it's just
I
the
think
situation.
He would be great. Yeah, and that too is I know he'd be a great cat in the right situation. And so if I can't give that to him, I'm like, yeah, buddy, I can't do that to you.
So listeners, if you need a cat,
if you know someone within, 2 hours or so of St. Louis that wants a cat, it would be a great owner.
Wouldn't that be crazy if you actually found a home for him through the podcast?
That'd be fucking amazing.
Yeah. Effie, how are you feeling today? We just kind of dropped a bombshell.
I know.
No, that's fair. I'm doing pretty all right. Just came back from a week of visiting Chicago and visiting my partner who is currently up there. And that's where I'll be moving in almost exactly a month.
Ooh.
So that was like exciting, but also like a little bit draining, just like being outside of my normal routine and just doing a lot. Like I always am doing a lot, but like I was doing extra a lot.
I don't even want to know what that looks like. Like when Effie says that she does a lot, she's not kidding.
Okay.
You do more than anybody I know. You're like insane. And I don't use that word lightly on this podcast.
No, we know you don't mean it in a bad way.
No, to be fair, let me like double check to make sure that I have this correct in my brain. I think it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, I'd taken off that Friday before Labor Day and like every day. Let's see, that Friday we like went into the city to like see our new neighborhood and explore that area. And then we went to a drag show. So we were out like all day. And then Saturday was very much like that again, except we went like rock climbing at like a gym near our new place and met up with her parents at the zoo and then went to dinner to carb load for the next morning where we got up at 5 a.m. to bike ride 30 miles.
Oh my God.
Right along Lake Michigan and then did a significant amount of shopping afterwards. And then Monday I went to the Ren Fair for the first time.
Oh, I've never done that.
With her aunt and uncle.
Wait, Lauren, you've never been to the Ren Fair?
No.
Oh my God, you would love it. I love Ren Fairs.
It was really fun. But it was also like really overstimulating for me at that point.
Wait a second. Effie, did you go to Bristol?
Yes, went to Bristol. Yes.
You can't see, but I'm like freaking out right now. That was my childhood favorite place in the world.
Yeah.
We went every summer. Fun. For those who don't know, it's the biggest Renaissance fair in the country in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's huge, dude. There's so much happening. Holy shit.
Also, someone was about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that Christina immediately like name dropped like that, where, was like, is this where it is? Because the whole time you were talking, knowing that you were in Chicago and I also have lived there for a while, I was like, oh, a drag show. Was it at Berlin? Because I love Berlin. The zoo. Did you go to Lincoln Park or Brookfield?
Yeah, so the drag show was like weirdly like out in the suburbs because like my partner is currently living with her parents out in the suburbs right now. I can't remember exactly. Oh, it was called Out of Space.
Oh, I think I've heard of that place.
Shout out.
Yeah, it was really fucking cool, dude. It was a drag king show specifically.
Oh. What does that mean?
So it's like mostly like mask leaning performances. One was literally a giant penis. It was so fucking good, dude. And like a fireman. So like very like mask performances, mostly by like AFAB people.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God. I'm going to need a picture of that.
I know.
Dude, I will send you a picture. I got one of like all of them together and I'll point out which one is the giant penis in the background.
In case you don't know.
in case it's unclear. But yeah, no. So I just got back from that big week yesterday, and it was cool because I got to, I took yesterday off from work and spent most of the day with my girlfriend here because been poly now for 2 months ish, with one partner in Chicago and one partner here in Norfolk. And that's been a very interesting balance, basically always being like long distance from one. And so like, as much as it was like hard to say goodbye to Bridget when I left Chicago, it was really nice to like see Allie again in Norfolk. And yesterday was a pretty good day. I don't know. Today's been all right. I got a little anxious about work stuff because I'm just a little bit behind on a project that I currently hate, but I'm trying to get done, and that's been annoying.
Well, thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast after we had to reschedule the first one.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, why don't we back up a little bit now that we've established how we're all feeling? Effie, what is your background and what's your background and like why are you on this podcast?
Why are you here? No.
Yeah. So my name's Effie. My pronouns are she, they. I am 26. Yeah, I'm 26 years old. I am born and raised Southeast Virginia, Virginia Beach and Norfolk specifically. I am trans/non-binary, queer, polyamorous, half Filipino. And yeah, I guess I'm on this podcast because basically everyone I know and care about in my life has some sort of mental health struggle or neurodivergence, or is just in some way had to deal with these kinds of things. And also because Christina kept asking me to be on it. So here we are.
The truth comes out.
Hey, at least it worked. You know that I keep asking a bunch of my friends, where are you?
No one even responded to the call out that you did.
Rude.
I'm upset. But yeah, Effie and I met at a queer writing group at this local bookstore. How would you describe Eleanor's? It's like a feminist bookstore, but I feel like that's not a good description. It's not enough.
Yeah. It's like this really cozy spot because it used to be like a house that they turned into like a little split level. The bottom level's a bookstore, and that's Eleanor's. And it's really cute and it feels really personable, I guess.
It's a community hub.
Yes, it really is. They host the Hampton Roads Mutual Aid Network meetings there, where people who are trying to organize around the region can meet up and talk about their organizing efforts. And yeah, it's just like a good spot to go to if you like have like a cause or an organization, or you just want some good feminist socialist literature.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So Effie, you were just telling me before Lauren came on that you were in therapy, and you said something that made me mad.
Oh no.
Yeah, so the most recent therapy session I had, which was on Friday, I was telling my therapist about all of the things that are happening right now, which is a lot because I have the upcoming move to Chicago and dealing with currently being long distance from my partner who is in Chicago that I'll be moving in with. But I just recently started a new relationship with somebody here in Norfolk. And so I will be long distance from them very soon. And on top of all of that, like I've never lived outside of Virginia. I've never made like this big of a move in my life. And so kind of dealing with all of that, but apparently dealing with it well enough because my therapist was like, yeah, it sounds like you got a lot going on, but also kind of sounds like you're handling it. So like if you don't need to like see me as often or do this as frequently, we can like... go down in frequency, or like you can, like, I'm not kicking you out, but like, it seems like you've got this. So I might be graduating therapy. I might have gotten too good for it.
Oh my.
Well, and so that makes me want to ask the question, like, would you consider yourself neurotypical, or like, what's your deal with mental health?
Oh yeah, no, definitely not neurotypical, but like, I do feel like I've gotten to a place recently where a lot of the things that I deal with, so primarily the primary like diagnoses that I have like officially gotten are ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, which is one of those that I keep forgetting that I have until it like really rears its head. And I'm like, oh my God. why can't I stop these very annoying, very intrusive thoughts? Why do I keep picking at my toenails at night?
Mhm.
And then I'm like, oh, right, I have OCD. But haven't been formally diagnosed, but I am what they call a peer-reviewed autistic, where every autistic person in my life is like, yeah.
I like that peer-reviewed autistic.
Mhm.
How long has all of that been going on with you? Like, when did you first start, I guess, being aware that you weren't well, I don't know. You're not what I would call a typical person. Who among us?
What's typical?
Right.
But I guess, like, what was growing up like for you? Let's go way back.
Yeah, so growing up was really interesting because my younger sister has what I believe the like current community term for it is like profound autism, or autism with high care needs,
Mhm.
where specifically like she does need a lot more direct attendant care, has a lot more difficulties in communications, is generally not a verbal communicator. And because of that, because her needs and learning differences and developmental differences were so obvious, it kind of made everything else that my older sister and I were dealing with seem like very small potatoes.
Lauren, you can relate to that.
Yep. Believe me, I'm already in my brain.
Yeah. And so like growing up, I very much thought of my older sister and myself as like the quote unquote normal ones, because that was very much like how my
Mhm.
parents and the other adults in our life would frame it as like, here are the two normal kids that help take care of the third not normal kid. And it wasn't until my older sister and I got older and moved out of the house that we started to realize how much, you know, the neurodivergencies were affecting us and like how we lived our lives. And like for me specifically, a lot of it didn't start showing up until college, because like my particular brands of like ADHD and OCD were ones that like gelled really well with school. And so I did like really well in class on paper. Like I was like
Yeah.
so good at tests that like I was always getting straight A's, even though there were some classes where like I never did the homework because I was so bad at remembering when to do homework or like motivating myself to do homework, that I would have like a 0 in the homework category. But because I was getting, you know, the extra credit and 100% on every test, that like I just kept sliding by without that being an issue until I got to college. And it started to be like a real difficulty to try to like balance things outside of that like very rigidly structured environment.
Mhm.
And then especially once I got out of college and was trying to live on my own like as an actual adult, that I was like, oh no, like there's several things that I am like just completely unready to handle with the tools that I have been given. Really, a lot of this came to a head 2 years ago, which was right after I ended a 7-year-long relationship and was about a year into transition and was figuring out a lot of things at once.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And then I ended up like having a bit of a breakdown and ended up going to partial hospitalization for a bit.
Fun fact, Effie and I have been to the same program.
Yeah.
Not at the same
I
time.
was just going to say, but at the same time. No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, fellow alumni
Yes.
of the same psych hospital, which is funny because my sister also went to that same one for a bit. I have one other friend who went there, and I have one friend who's thinking about going there. So
Well, there aren't a lot of providers in this area.
that is true.
Like, you got to go to Virginia Beach, which sucks ass.
Mm.
Yeah.
But your family's in Virginia Beach, right?
Yeah, and what's funny is at the time I was living like literally across the street from it. So I would
Nice.
just walk there for partial.
But back to the breakdown.
Yeah, and so like it was then that I realized like a lot of like my codependent behaviors, both in romantic relationships and with my family. That's where I got diagnosed with ADHD. That's where I got like leveled on my anxiety meds, which was really helpful. And yeah, it's just like the past 2 years especially have been huge. Like I feel like it's been like a decade's worth of like work and progress and change as far as like my mental health goes, where like yeah, like there are things that like 2 years ago me like would have like just absolutely like crumbled even at like the thought of that I can now like navigate pretty readily with like all the support systems that I've put in place over the past couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, you seem like a very confident social person to me, like when I met you. And so I'm even more impressed that you've managed to do so much work and push past all of these discomforts. because there's a lot of discomfort navigating life, as a queer person in Virginia.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that because like most of like my support system, my chosen family, most of my friends right now, most of the people that I like spend my time with are people that I've met in the past 2 years. Because before that, it was basically my family of origin and my then partner's family. And like that was it. Like I didn't really have friends. I didn't really have like chosen people in my life because of, the anxiety, but also like I was not out at the time. And turns out that like not being yourself makes it very hard to like actually make friends.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So what was that journey like?
So figuring out that I was trans was, strangely enough, like I feel like it wasn't that long of a process. It's kind of one of those things that like I can't say how long I like quote unquote knew I was trans because like my gender identity is like very kind of amorphous, kind of squiggly, kind of a loose cloud of things in my brain.
I get that a lot.
Yeah, but like I knew for a while that like people were incorrect in some way when they like just automatically assumed that I was a boy or like grouped me with other boys or like eventually men or whatever. And the way I describe it is like it felt like somebody had like slightly mispronounced my name, but like not enough that it's worth correcting them over. And so like that's how it felt like a lot of the time, but I didn't really have the words for it, but I was just like, I don't think that's correct, but I don't have a better answer, so whatever.
That's so relatable.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of describing it.
Yeah, but then the pandemic happened, and like what happened for a lot of people, having to spend a lot more time by myself. And specifically, I graduated college spring of 2020, and obviously was not a great time to be getting a job in 2020. So for like about a year between graduation and when I got my first like post-college job, well, one, for a while I was taking care of my younger sister basically full-time for a little bit there, which was a little stressful. But eventually we were able to get attendant care back in the house with all the COVID guidelines in place and everything. And so for probably about 9 months or so, I had no school, I had no job. I was just in my parents' place having a lot of time with myself. And that's when I realized like, oh, I do maybe have a better answer now, actually. And like there were definitely like moments here and there before then that like had popped up where I was like, oh yeah, I think I might be that thing, but it just felt so scary to deal with that I would just push it back down. But again, having to spend so much time with myself and having the kind of weird freedom of like not being perceived so much and being able to think more like, oh, how do I want to feel rather than how am I used to people seeing me out in the world, kind of gave me a little bit more leeway to figure that out. And so I initially just came out as non-binary, they, them pronouns. And then I realized that I wanted to start taking hormone therapy. So I started doing that. And then for a minute, I identified like exclusively as like a trans woman. And now I've kind of settled on like trans woman / non-binary. Again, like it's this big, vague cloud of gender in my head, but like definitely closer to woman than anything else. But yeah, and that was really interesting because like it did sort of kind of directly lead to the end of that relationship that I was in at the time. I had been dating the same person for 5 years before the pandemic hit, and then we got engaged, and then we were engaged for about 2 years before we decided to break up. And part of that breakup was because the way I like to jokingly put it is like, hey, turns out she's straight. Turns out I'm a woman. What are you going to do? You know?
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. And it was good. And we're still friends now. And it was amicable, but it was still difficult, you know, because it was simultaneously like kind of validating because it's like, wow, yeah, so you really don't see me as the gender that I had been assigned and that I had been playing for so long. That's cool. But also that kind of means that like me transitioning, me being myself leads to the end of stability, leads to the end of like this long-term thing that had been my like kind of rock for a while.
Well, yeah.
For better or worse.
And you didn't have many friends. You were just codependent, as you put it.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was very codependent. And we were long distance for all of college. We went to 2 different colleges, and we both very much, oh, Cora, don't click on anything. Sorry. Yeah. So we were long distance for all of college, and we both very much used that as an excuse to not have to put ourselves out there. Like every Friday night when people would invite us to things, we could just be like, oh, sorry, I gotta call my partner, long distance.
That's wild to me because you were so young when you got together.
Yeah.
Like you're acting like a married couple.
Yeah. Yeah. We were like 17. And then we were just like, yep, this is it. We don't need any other people. We don't need any other groups or experiences or whatever. Because like, I think part of it too is like that we were scared that like if we found new friends and new ways of being, that we would then become different people who didn't like each other as much.
Interesting. It's almost like you had a suspicion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're like, don't rock the boat.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we were one of those couples that like to brag about how infrequently we like ever got into fights or whatever. We're like, yeah, we like never fight. And then it's because we just like never allowed ourselves to like express or hold contrary opinions to each other.
Oof. Yeah. I feel like so many people can relate to that. I mean, Lauren, can you? I realize I've been talking, like I've been asking most of the questions.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I don't know, because my relationships were kind of different, but sort of the same, because we've talked before about how a lot of my past relationships have been me finding people that don't basically, I'm not a needy person. I don't feel like to start out with, but I feel like I looked for people that needed me less than I needed them. So then it was easy to just be like, well, I'm also easygoing. So when they do their thing, I'm not going to raise any fuss ever because I'm not that sort of person.
Well, it's low maintenance.
Yeah.
And that goes back to Effie, what you were saying. It just felt very low maintenance, but that means you're not challenging yourselves. You're not growing.
Right.
So when you broke up, I imagine that must have been really scary, just kind of finding yourself quivering and alone and with all this new stuff going on.
Yeah. No, it was terrifying because I realized again, outside of my family and her family, I realized I hung out with like one person.
Which I feel like is more normal than people think. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. But I was like, oh, shit. And also at that time, my parents were not doing great at, incorporating the new name and pronouns and everything. And I kept trying to give them resources. I kept trying to give them reminders and stuff. And then I realized kind of by accident that especially when it was just the two of my parents together, that like they weren't even trying, like they weren't even correcting themselves between each other. And then I think that's why like it never kicked in when trying to have conversation with me, because like they were pretending like nothing had changed when I wasn't there. And so at that point I was like, hey, I'm not going to do this with y'all until you can like get your shit together. And so like pretty soon, like after the breakup, I was also just like not talking to my parents either.
Oh my God.
So I was kind of panicking. But yeah, then I made maybe not the most rational decision of like, well, I guess I'll cure this loneliness by getting on the dating apps.
Effie.
Not the first to do this.
But hear me out though. It kind of ended up working pretty well because like a lot of the people that I ended up meeting, even before we met, were like, hey, I think this is probably more of like a friendship vibe thing. And I was like, okay, dope. Because I also need a lot of friends right now.
Yeah, that's cool. Then I can have a friend. That's fine too.
Yeah. I'm actually like, wow, yeah, I need a lot of those. So sign me up.
I feel like that happens a lot more in the queer community.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I can say from straight, hetero, whatever, online dating, I feel like everybody still says that, but it never actually happens. And it's not going to when you leave.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about how you came to form your chosen family, because I think a lot of people listening want that, but they do feel alone and they don't know where to start. And it's very overwhelming. And like, you have a really great friend group. Like, you've incorporated me into it. Yeah. And I obviously love how it turned out for you, but would you say most of those came from getting on the dating apps in the beginning?
Yeah, so it's interesting because like now, like a lot of the friends that I made from like that initial period, I don't see as often, partially because like the two that I was closest to ended up moving away pretty quickly for different reasons. And I haven't stayed as much in contact. Funnily enough, like right before we started recording this, I got a text out of the blue from one of the people that I had met on the dating apps and hadn't talked to in like months.
Oh my God.
She literally like just reached out to me tonight. I was like, hey, it's been a minute. How are you doing?
Oh my God. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's really funny that comes up. But yeah, now primarily it's been people that I've met through like various, like, honestly kind of funny. Like sometimes I think about like how I've met some of my friends and it feels like an author was trying too hard to think of creative ways for a character to meet other characters in their story. Because as mentioned, I met Christina at a queer writers group, which feels very in character, but also I met one of my best friends at a Pecha Kucha night, which
What
is
that?
it is a presentation format where you do a slideshow that's 20 slides. Each of them have to be exactly 20 seconds, and you can present about whatever you want. And I presented about just like random bits of language that I find funny or interesting. And then somebody came up to me after the presentation and was asking a bunch of questions. And I was like, you're cool. We should hang out. And now she's like one of my best friends. One of my other best friends is someone that I met at work, but specifically while we were on a project that required us to be in a converted shower closet scanning documents for like 2 months straight, where the room was so small there was only enough room for one chair, so we had to like switch off who was sitting down.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
that'll do it.
Yeah.
Either your best friends or your worst enemies after that.
Yeah, but no, it was like it actually ended up being super great because she's super cool.
So you put yourself out there basically, which is very different from when you described yourself in college.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you also have anxiety. So, like, what gives? What's the secret?
Great question. Again, I think a lot of it came from the kind of like self-confidence that has built up like since transition specifically. And like now that I feel like I am like walking through the world more as myself, the anxiety is still very much there. But I think for me, at least, like transition was like such a big thing that had been an anxiety for so long. And then once I did it, I was like, oh shit, this is fucking amazing. That now whenever I get like a similar anxiety, my brain has that kind of precedent to lean back on. And it's like, well, hey, you were anxious about this for like years and then you fucking did it and it was great. And so like, I'll still get anxious reaching out to people after I've like met them at a thing. Even with you, like after the queer writers group, I was still like, oh, this is kind of weird. This feels kind of strange or whatever, but fuck it. Who knows?
Well, I was so happy you did.
And also I was thinking as you're saying that, I'm like, it has to be a little bit easier to be like, well, yeah, I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety right now. But, you know, I used to be dealing with a lot of anxiety and also not feeling like my authentic self. So I got one thing in my corner. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like running with those weights, you know, and then like eventually you like take off the weights and you're like, whoa, I'm like a lot stronger than I thought.
Yeah.
That's funny because I saw someone walking on my bike ride just now and they had like weights tied to their ankles.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
Which one's anxiety?
Yeah.
I'm going to name my weights. Not that I walk with weights.
I think too, one of the things that's really helped is not really like trying to quote unquote overcome my anxiety, but just like focus on something else. And for me, a lot of that is just curiosity. Like I'm so curious about other people. I'm so fascinated by like what I might find out about other people that I'm like, yeah, even though like I'm really fucking anxious to like reach out or to like start a conversation with somebody, I can be much more motivated by just trying to figure out like, what's this person's deal? What's going on here?
Yeah.
What can I learn about them?
Wait, what did you think my deal was?
I don't know.
Well,
that's the thing.
I'd seen you around at like protests, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, in fact, I have a picture of Effie's partner that I took at a protest. And I didn't realize it was her until after the fact. It's a small town.
Yeah.
It is.
But yeah, I was so happy you reached out because like I am not so good at that now. And I've always seen you as the kind of person who does that. And so when I got to know you and you told me that it's really hard for you, actually, I was like, oh my God, you're doing so good.
Thanks. Yeah. Again, like I feel like not to say that like the friend group that I have right now or whatever is like a fluke or whatever, but this is new for me. Like I've never had this robust of a support network before. Like I've never had like these close of friendships in my life before. And I was joking before we started recording that like on the days when I'm feeling really good and like really productive and I like get a bunch of chores done, I joke with my sister that I'm like, haha, I'm fixed now. I'm actually neurotypical and mentally healthy and I don't need any help anymore.
Well, your therapist
because I
thinks
made
so.
food for myself.
Yeah.
Because I got like 3 things done. I'm actually, I'm perfect now.
What are you doing on this podcast?
But like, that's kind of how I feel with like how this like friend group has come together. It feels kind of like just like one of those periods in my life where things just like very serendipitously seem to like come together. And I really don't know how it happened, to be honest.
That's the thing. Like last week, Lauren and I were talking about rumination and how like when you're thinking about this stuff all the time, it can do more harm than good and really hold you back.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's the kind of thing that does happen. Like when you are living as your most authentic self and when you are putting yourself out there, which sounds simple, but like if you struggle with mental health, you know, we know it's the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that you're on the verge of leaving the support system, how does that make you feel?
Oh, terrifying.
Yeah. Well, especially since you have, you know, now you have a girlfriend here.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to hear about your poly journey too. And I mean, I've kind of heard about it already, but you know.
Yeah. So I guess I'll kind of start with like the friend group thing. So like Bridget and I, we've been together for about 2 years and have been planning to move to Chicago for about like a year and change. And what's funny is even though her family is like from that area and she grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and is like familiar with it, it was kind of my idea to move back there because I've just wanted to live in a bigger city for a while now. I do my best to like bike and walk and use transit everywhere, and Virginia Beach and Norfolk are not great areas for that.
No.
And so sometimes I feel like a crazy person trying to stick to that in this area because there are so many things here that like actively discourage me from trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a while I wanted to move to a place that's a little friendlier to that kind of lifestyle. And in general, just like has more going on because I've always been just curious to see what living in a bigger city would be like generally. Again, it's funny because most of the people now that I consider my close friends, I've met since basically deciding that I was going to move away, which is so wild. And every time I think to myself, like, well, okay, like I have enough friends. What's the point of like trying to make even more friendships if I know that like I'm going to leave soon? But again, it always comes back to like the idea of like, well, everything's going to end eventually. Everything's going to change eventually. Every relationship is going to go through some fundamental shift at some point, whether that's like a move or like more permanent things, you know? And so it's like, at least in this case, I get to know what that major shift is probably going to be and when it's probably going to happen. So I might as well. It sometimes gets to me thinking like, because I don't hate it here. You know, I don't hate Norfolk. I don't hate living in this area, even though I do have like a lot of criticisms, the public transit, the militarization, the transient nature of like seemingly like the culture at large here. It just feels like even for the people who are permanently here, that like there's not like an attachment that I've seen to, you know, that people have to other places.
Exactly. I've only been here for 3 years and I've noticed it. And I have really struggled here at times because of those things.
Yeah, it's a really weird place, but there's also like a lot of things that I love about it. And now so many people that I've come to like really, really care about here. And that was even before I met my girlfriend here, which was like 2 months ago. And that was wild because like Bridget and I had been talking about the idea of doing polyamory for, I don't know, probably like 8 or 9 months at this point. And it's kind of always been a thing that I have been sort of philosophically open to, but like my past relationship, again, very codependent and like very jealous in nature of like any type of like closeness or intimacy with other people was taken as like a threat to the relationship. And so like was a complete like non-starter of a conversation. But
I feel like that's kind of common with monogamy.
Yeah.
The toxic side of monogamy, if you will.
Yeah. No, very much felt like I was, sort of like compelled into it. Like it was not a thing that I would have chosen, but I was so scared to threaten the stability of that relationship, to like investigate that any further. But since meeting Bridget and being in a relationship with her and talking with her about like so many of the things that like I wasn't able to talk about in my past relationship because of those jealousy issues, that I started to realize like what a healthy, secure relationship looked like for the first time. And that kind of gave me the courage to be like, hey, so for a long time, I've kind of been thinking about this like theoretically, but I don't know like how much or in what ways I would want to explore it. But like, hey, it's a thing that I have thought of. And she was very supportive of that. And so we kept thinking about that. And then especially once she moved back to the Chicago area earlier this summer, I was like, hey, I know this is kind of a weird idea, but like considering that we're long distance, and especially because I was feeling very touch starved at the time as well, that I was like, this could be like a good like trial run period for us to try out polyamory and whatever. And so like I was very much expecting to like just have like a bit of like a hoe phase for the summer. Like I was just gonna like fucking like hook up with people or, just like little casual things or whatever. And like I did have like one hookup, which was fun and like an interesting experience for sure. And then literally a day after that one night stand, I had my first date with Allie. And now we have been dating for like 2 months, and it is not a casual thing at all.
That's such a trip.
Yeah. And again, like it feels the same kind of like feeling of like when I was making these new friends, even after I knew I was going to move to Chicago, I was like, well, if I put on my dating profile that like I'm going to be moving in 4 months, nobody who's looking for anything serious is going to like engage or whatever.
Right.
And the thing was, Allie wasn't looking for anything serious either. But then, whoops.
There is something to be said for lowering the stakes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree completely.
I mean, that sounds bad to say, like, oh, the stakes are so low. But it's true, like with the friendships too. It's like,
Yeah.
It could take some pressure off. And if something still ends up being serious, it was like, I didn't go in with that focus. Like, it has to be the one.
Yeah, no. And it's very interesting because there's like both the decreased pressure of like, I know like this isn't going to, or like it's not assumed that like this is going to last forever. And on top of that, like I have a limited amount of time here. So like I might as well just, see who's out there for either friendships or romantic relationships, because very soon, like I won't really have that option to find out anymore. And those two combining forces have led me to this very interesting circumstance.
Well, and I know at the beginning you said you wanted to talk about supporting people with mental illnesses and like emotional needs. And when you talk about, being with two people, essentially, it makes me think of all the emotional labor that must be involved. And like, not labor, because like you obviously want to do it.
Yeah.
But how has that been like?
It's been interesting.
Do you find yourself having to like take time for yourself just out of necessity? It's not really your thing, is it?
Yeah, I guess. Okay. So for some background, I've struggled a long time with like a bit of a savior complex, a bit of a self-sacrificial type of caring, again, because from a very young age, having to take care of my younger sister in ways that like I probably shouldn't have been asked to as like a young child, levels of like responsibility and stress about having to like physically protect my younger sister from like harming herself or like getting harmed or harming others, which was a lot to handle at like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
But I got a lot of like validation from that when I did like do a good job at it. So like from a very young age, I was like, oh, this is how I earn my worth, is by like taking care of people, no matter how much like stress it causes me, no matter how much danger it puts me in.
Oh my God, we can both relate so much.
Yes.
Yeah. And so like I struggled with that for a very long time, to the point where like I equated being stressed and feeling at risk of something as being like the sign that I was doing something right. And it took a lot to unlearn that. And one of the things that's helped with that a lot is that people in my life, including, my partners now, have like outright denied me like doing stupid things in order to help them. Like
Like
things,
what?
Okay, funnily enough, this one's not either of my current partners, but it was one of the first people that I like dated 2 years ago. I think it was the morning after like our second date. I was at her place and she was waiting for a ride that was going to take her to a wedding that she was going to in North Carolina. But the ride was like 2 hours late, wasn't picking up their phone, wasn't responding to texts. And I like look at her and I go, I know this is crazy, but like, I'm not doing anything today. So like, and she's like, no, you're not driving me down to North Carolina on our like second date.
That tracks for you though.
Yeah. But like shit like that, where I'm like very clearly like about to do something that would like take a lot of energy or like mean that I would have to like cancel other plans.
Go way out of your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people in my life have been a lot better about being like, no, don't do this. And I've also gotten better at like not only like saying no to things, which is hard in itself, but like the bigger one has been not volunteering for things that I don't think I have the energy for.
Mm-hmm.
You volunteer for a lot of stuff.
I do volunteer for a lot. But a lot of the things that I do now are like things that I've figured out make me feel good in a way that like don't rely on me being stressed while doing it. And so like just kind of add to my energy overall, even if it on paper, looks like labor or whatever. Cause like there's so many things that like I do in fact just get like a good kick out of, like taking people to the airport.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but I just like, I love that shit.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff like that where like I've been trying to like extricate the positives of that because like it's a good thing that like I do feel as good as I feel when I like help people out or when I support my friends or my partners, and just trying to be more aware of like when I'm doing that while also stressing myself out or while also neglecting my needs or whatever. I think it's been helpful that like both of my partners are relatively independent people. If anything, I feel like I have to be the one to be like, hey, this thing that you're doing looks like it could be something that like I could support you with or help with in some way. Let me know if you want that, instead of the expectation being there that like I support them in like every individual thing. And it's so funny because even when I volunteer that sometimes it's like not even needed. Because there was one day that like Allie had kind of a high stakes vet appointment for her cat on a weekday. And I was like, well, I work remotely, so like I can just like work from your place and come with you to like drop him off or whatever. And then the same day, Bridget had an interview for a job in Chicago that she was like really nervous about. And I was like, yeah, so I'll do that with you in the morning. And then when Bridget has her interview, I'll be available for her to call in the afternoon or whatever. But then the appointment went fine and the interview went great and they were both like chill. And then I was the one stressed the whole day about something completely different. And so instead, I just had two girlfriends supporting me. On the day that I was like hyping myself up to support both of them.
That's so precious.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, it's easy to think about like, oh, well, I have to do, double the mental and emotional work, double the planning and whatever. And that's true. But I also get two people supporting me and caring about me in this very particular way, which is kind of amazing, honestly.
That's honestly a great segue to like a final thing I wanted to talk about that we've talked about in real life is like asking for things from your community, because like I feel like we're both
notoriously terrible at it.
Yeah, we're both terrible at it. We both like will offer ourselves, like we'll bend over backward for our community, but then when it comes to asking for things, it's hard.
Yeah.
Do you remember that conversation I'm referencing?
Yeah.
You were like, this is what community is for.
Yeah.
And I've seen you practicing it, like in the group chat. Like you ask for stuff, like for favors and stuff.
Yeah.
And that has the consequence of like making people feel like they can ask for stuff in return.
Right.
Which is beautiful. Like you never think of asking for a favor as like doing someone else a service by like, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was actually just thinking about this the other day that I think almost all of my friends that live around here have helped me or Bridget get to or from the airport at some point, like just this summer. Because Christina has lent me her car one time when my car was busted so that I could pick Bridget up from the airport. A couple of our friends who live close to it brought me to like a red-eye flight at like 5 a.m. on a weekday.
Oh, wow.
Angels.
Yeah. And so like, it's been really great because again, that's one of the things that I love doing for other people. And it's been kind of weird to like ask so many times for help in return. But yeah, kind of like you were saying that like it opens the window for them to ask. And so like, sometimes I do make myself think about it this way that I'm like, well, if I enjoy helping them out with it so much, I can trick them into asking for help more often by me asking for help.
Well, literally, that's where I was going with that.
Yeah. So it's like secretly, I'm just opening up a way to do more helping by, being responsible and asking for help when I need it.
That is actually really helpful for me to hear.
Yeah. And then also, I think of it as a form of like anti-capitalist community building. Because...
you wait until we're almost done to drop the C word.
I know.
Now I'm going to get going.
Yeah.
Talk more about that.
Yeah. We're like so much of, the gig economy, like Uber and Grubhub and like all of these exist to replace either like organized services like taxis and stuff, or to basically just replace things that we used to just like do for friends. And like and again, this isn't to like shame anybody who like needs or uses, because I will like use a Lyft when I have to in like a different city or whatever, obviously. But like whenever possible, like trying to think of ways around these systems, trying to think of ways to not engage with them, to instead like ask for help and offer help, like not only like saves, that money from going into the pockets of like the CEOs of these companies, but also helps us like build and imagine a world that exists outside of them,
Yes. It's so important, and not very many people are talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, because like a world without the gig economy is a world in which we have to like ask each other for a lot more favors. I think as hard as that is to get used to, I think that's a better world than like having the kind of like sanitized impersonal interactions of transactions, but instead like building a community where like you trust people to be there and you feel like you are trusted by the people that you care about. So there's like a lot of times where I'm like, I really don't want to ask for help, but then like my little like organizer communist brain kicks in and it's like, but you got to build a better world. Okay. And building a better world sometimes means asking for a ride to the airport.
Absolutely.
Again, it's kind of like with the curiosity thing that I mentioned earlier, where like I don't really get over the anxiety of asking or of reaching out or of making connections, but I can just get my brain to focus on something else for long enough to get me there.
Gotta trick yourself.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we say goodbye? I feel like this has been such a good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course.
Yeah, I gotta say, props to you. You had some of the best metaphors that I've heard.
That means a lot coming from Lauren.
Thank you. That probably comes from the time where I was like really heavily involved in church and thought I wanted to be a pastor at some point. And I was like, this is what pastors do. They have good metaphors.
That's
Dude,
funny.
that's
That's
true.
hilarious. I didn't even think of that.
Wild time.
I'll be thinking about that all night now. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you from the Pickles and Vodka listeners as well.
Yep.
And I hope you all have a good night.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
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 If you like what you heard, don't forget to tell a friend about our podcast. You can direct them to picklesandvodka.substack.com, where they can find our entire archive and also get access to our chat. We're on Instagram at Pickles and Vodka Podcast, Facebook.com/Pickles and Vodka Podcast, and YouTube.com/@Pickles and Vodka Podcast. My Instagram is @XtinaJumper, and Lauren is @LaurenAFH. We'll see you next week.